Chelsea have won yet again in the Premier League, this time beating Newcastle by 2-1, and in this video we're going to be breaking down how they did it and how they managed to unlock that Newcastle United defence. Newcastle have one of the best defensive records in the Premier League, so to really break down and unlock that defence, Chelsea needed to do something a little bit different, and that's exactly what Enzo Maresca did. Normally with Chelsea you'd see either the right or left back invert into midfield. This would naturally push one of the two centre midfielders forwards and they'd create a box formation. Instead, with this, you did see an inversion, but what you saw was something a little bit different. Malo Gusto on this right hand side was the player that was going to be inverted, but I also want to highlight Reece James on this left hand side, brought in instead of Marco Correa, I believe, for his strength, his speed and his capability on stopping a form of counter-attack. His passing is also very good, so this will be the Chelsea back three once Malo Gusto inverts. But instead of inverting next to one of the centre midfielders, he went higher and instead became almost a right-sided 10. Now notice what I said just then, a right-sided 10. Now normally this would be the area that Cole Palmer would operate in. Normally you'd see Gusto move into the left-hand side, Palmer move over to the right and create that really good link with Noni Madueke. Instead, Chelsea did something very different, and that was push Palmer over to this left hand side. This allowed Malo Gusto to move into this right hand 10 position, and it changed a couple of dynamics for Chelsea going forwards. But not only that, when the back three came around, you had a defensive protective screening of Moises Caicedo and of course Romeo Lavia. This then created Chelsea's box and they were away. Malo Gusto operating in this right 10 role and Cole Palmer in this left 10. Now this isolated a couple of things. It allowed and to exploit Tonali in that right hand side channel for Newcastle, the left hand channel for Chelsea, but it also gave Palmer the opportunity to use that left foot and play passes through into Pedro Neto, who came into the side down this left. It really allowed for Chelsea to really be that little bit more direct on this left channel, while also giving some space to Gusto and Madueke for double up opportunities. Gusto moving around when he needs to, giving Madueke a bit of space, but also some extra cover. Newcastle are a very good defensive unit, and Eddie Howe likes to press his sides quite aggressively. Utilising this midfield 5 in a 4-5-1 formation, it allows them to really pen teams in. So instead, a different tactics was employed by Chelsea. Instead of going through Moises Caicedo and Romeo Lavia through that possessional based build-up that we know Enzo Maresca likes to use, they instead decided to go direct, or at least more direct than they would normally. Cole Palmer dropping a little bit deeper to receive passes from the likes of Colwill, from the likes of James, to then spin around and make plays in between the lines, but also beyond that high line that Newcastle like to play. Pedro Neto was a prime example of this and a prime beneficiary of this particular setup and system. Normally you'd see Jadon Sancho, but he's not exactly the quickest of players. Pedro Neto absolutely is though, so when Palmer ended up dropping into these spaces, he was able to spin, turn and play great passes down this line. And the same could have been said for Madueke, but Chelsea decided to attack down their favoured left side in this particular instance, utilising Palmer to great effect. And this is in fact where Chelsea's first goal comes from. Let's break down that Chelsea first goal, because I think it's really interesting to find out what's going on, and this was a telltale sign of the tactics employed by Enzo Maresca and this Chelsea setup. So you've got Chelsea who have recovered possession from Newcastle, who ended up committing themselves forward. You can tell this by the spacing of Tino Livramento and of course Joe Linton, but the positioning of all of the players in and around the Chelsea half, so they're about to go on a counter-attack. Gusto plays the ball over to Palmer, who controls it brilliantly, and as he controls it, he just drifts it over to this left-hand side. Now notice the fact that he doesn't pick his head up. He doesn't pick his head up because he knows that Pedro Neto is going to be making that run in beyond. He will have seen Tino Livramento so close to him, and then it's about spinning in beyond. Then it's about spinning that ball round over to his left hand side. Look at this Newcastle pressure as well though. You got 1, you got 2, you got 3, really trying to make it difficult for Cole Palmer to try and get his eye in. But he did manage to turn, he did manage to get it, and just that pass here was just sublime. It passes it through to Pedro Neto, who we can already see is on his bike, but this pass is absolutely exquisite. I've seen some people call it the pass of the this season, and I can completely understand why. But just look at the two body positions of Tino Livramento here, and of course Pedro Neto here. One's going one way, one's almost a bit stagnant and possibly going the other. I think this was just the ending to this move, and it meant that Tino Livramento struggled to really recover back. Look, he's still backtracking, he's not quite there. Neto is gone. The ball is in mid-flight, and it's this point that I think Livramento realises that he's made a mistake. It goes beyond him, and then it's about who can get to this pass first. Is it going to be Cher or is it going to be Neto? We know the pace of Neto is absolutely electric. But one thing I think is really important as well is Nicholas Jackson beating Dan Burn, which isn't a surprise, but it's his drive and determination to try and get to that box, and then Neto's movement down this left-hand side. He gets to the ball before Dan Burn and obviously Fabian Cher does, and then he crosses it through to Nicholas Jackson, who is in acres of space. But all of this is afforded because of the directness of play and the quickness of passing, and of course the sheer quality of Cole Palmer. That's not to say that Newcastle weren't in this game, because they absolutely were. While they struggled to create all too much from their midfield trio, it was out wide that they really started to get a bit of joy, and it was more down this Newcastle left hand side than Chelsea right. The overlapping runs from Lewis Hall helping out with Harvey Barnes, who in fairness did struggle occasionally, really started to cause some problems for Chelsea, and this was down to the lack of tracking back of Noni Madueke, causing Malo Gusto a number of problems. And this is actually in the build-up to Newcastle's goal. Lewis Hall makes a fantastic overlapping run, just creating that overload and giving Barnes an option. The option is to either pass it through to Hall or drive infield. Now we know how good Harvey Barnes can be from the outside of the box, cutting inside, but it was in this particular scenario that he decides to utilise Lewis Hall, and this caused Gusto quite a few problems because Caicedo wasn't able to get across, Madueke didn't cover, and Lewis Hall and Harvey Barnes did cause quite a number of problems, and as I said, they got themselves a goal. Newcastle had some really good moments in this match, and with a little bit more quality, I really do think they could have had a couple more goals. In this particular scenario, you had Tino Livramento driving into midfield, and this is one of the only times that you're going to see Caicedo and Lavia in this match really exposing that Chelsea back line. Look at the difference in between them. Joe Linton has taken up that space and he's received the pass from Livramento. But while this is all happening, just notice Lewis Hall and Noni Madueke. Madueke needs to be switched onto this. It's brilliant play from Hall, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But Madueke has to be seeing this alarm bells. He has to know he's got to go help his fullback out. He has to know about the overlap, and I'm sure that's something that Enzo Maresca will not be happy with. But as for the way that Newcastle built up, because I think that's really important as well, it was really, really good. You've got Joe Linton between the lines. You've got Livramento making that overload into the centre of midfield. Tonali helping out as well. And it's through this transition that Newcastle really started to get going. Then, when you're talking about passing the ball through, Joe Linton really does well to pick his head up and play it out wide. Again, Livramento picking the ball up and playing it through to Barnes, and you've got that overlapping run from, of course, Lewis Hall. But just off your screen, what you've actually got as well is Noni Madueke, and he's realised this moment, but it's too late. He realises too late, and as the ball gets played over towards Lewis Hall, it's too much for Gusto. I feel sorry for him in this point because he needs some help. Madueke doesn't realise that he's forgotten his man, and it's, again, like I said, too late. But it's really well worked by Newcastle. Fantastic layoff to Lewis Hall, who makes a great pass through into Alexander Isak. Again, I think he's been given far too much space considering his quality, but it's so well done from Newcastle. Proper good quality, really good pass, and it ended up being a goal. This was an area of the pitch that Newcastle isolated very, very well and exposed Chelsea on a couple of occasions due to Madueke not tracking back, but also due to the really good overloads that they had with Lewis Hall and Harvey Barnes. Quality. But in the end, it was the pockets of space in between the midfield line and the defensive line that really did start to hurt Newcastle, and in particular this left-hand side for Chelsea, where Cole Palmer was situated. Nicholas Jackson on occasion would do a selfless roll and just drop himself back a few yards, and this took occupation of Bruno Guimaraes. This meant that he wasn't able to shuffle across as much to really get to Cole Palmer, and that gave Palmer just a little bit added space. Cher wasn't aggressive enough when it came to closing him down, and neither was Livramento, and that meant that Palmer had freedom of the park on occasion, and he did really make it count. Of course, you have Lavia onto Tonali, Caicedo onto Joe Linton, and when Gusto doesn't invert forwards, it then started to help when Jackson dropped down a little bit because it created that 4v3 yet again. Tonali, Joelinton, Guimaraes against Lavia, Palmer, Jackson and Caicedo, and all of the time you had Chelsea with that numerical advantage in the centre of the park, and for Chelsea's goal they made it count. Of course they turn over the ball with Isak, but then it was the quickness and the directness of play. I think that's really important to mention as well. Chelsea attempted 62 long passes in this match, and I don't think you'd really associate them with some kind of directness of play or those kind of long passes, but they did because they wanted to make sure they were able to bypass this Newcastle high pressing line, but also make sure they were able to get the ball to Cole Palmer as quickly as possible into these transitional changes and allow themselves to try and exploit the spaces between that Newcastle midfield and that Newcastle defence, and they did it perfectly for Chelsea's second goal. It was a cracking game, and I thought Enzo Maresca set up brilliantly to unlock the door to allow Chelsea to get those goals to beat Newcastle United, who are a very, very good defensive side. Chelsea just happened to have a little bit too much quality for them on the day. And finally, before we end, let's take a look at that Chelsea second goal, the winning goal. First thing I want to mention is the positioning of some Newcastle players. You've got Joelinton here in his normal position, Bruno Guimaraes in his normal position, but Tonali is actually behind the play a little bit, and he's actually out of position. This means that Isak drops a little bit deeper, but at the same time, I want you to pay attention to Colwill, because Colwill gets aggressive on this, and I think this is really, really impressive. You can tell a confident side when they start to get aggressive onto their opponents, and Colwill does just that. It's this kind of aggression that prevents Isak from being able to turn. Yes, he backs up into Colwill, but it doesn't allow him to spin him beyond, and this is really important because while he could lay it off to Bruno Guimaraes, and of course it's a miscontrol, of course it's unfortunate, but it's the aggression that gets shown from Chelsea. Look at this. It's the aggression that gets shown that I think is really impressive from a Chelsea perspective. It's disappointing from Newcastle, of course, but it's really good from Chelsea. You've got Fofana who can come and cover as well, but the aggression from Colwill is really good. And then following on from this, you've got the misplaced pass, but you've also got Romeo Lavia here to back up his centre-back, and you've here got three Newcastle players almost against one. You've got the Newcastle player who lost the ball, and you've got two going for it. Lavia gets there first, and that's the next crucial stage. But in Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes desperately going for the ball because of that press, because of the need to recover the ball as quickly as possible, he's left Cole Palmer in acres of space, and this should spell absolute danger. Serious, serious danger. Now, Cole Palmer has acres of space to work in, and he drives. He drives forwards, and it's all about the space in between the midfield and the defence. The defence isn't aggressive enough. If we combine this with how aggressive Colwill was, that's the real difference here. The space that Cole Palmer gets, but also it's the aggression or the lack thereof from the Newcastle defenders. I feel sorry for them because of the timing of this and because of the real speed that this happens, but the Newcastle midfield gets bypassed, the defence isn't aggressive enough, and it's that space in beyond that's get left to Cole Palmer to really exploit. He takes a shot, and it's brilliantly shot, but I think Pope probably should do a little bit better. I'm sure Newcastle fans will be a bit disappointed with this, but as for Chelsea, they will be ecstatic. A great finish from Cole Palmer, who gets a pre-assist, I suppose you could say, because Neto gets the assist, but it's a fantastic pass and obviously a great goal for Chelsea. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. How did you find this game, and what do you make of both sides going into the next run of fixtures? I would love to hear from you, so please do let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you ever so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.